Okay, so we've made the stem on here now. It's pretty sharp, and then we'll cut the bird beak off, but I want to taper it a little more first. Here we'll use these radical drawing dies now, but I want to get on the other side.
You're going to have to get me an asbestos suit here pretty soon.
Do what?
Get an asbestos suit.
Yeah. Well, is that one ready, I think? What were we going to make with that? Got another piece hot there, and I can't remember what I was going to make with it. Going to make a rope die with it. Okay, this tool is grooved on all four sides, but I'm just going to go in basically with then I'm going to turn it and go back. Okay, that's pretty much done there now. I'll show you the inside of it. And we run a piece of 1/2 inch square through there after it cools down, and it'll make the grooves in it, and then we'll twist it and make rope looking guys. No, I want to let this cool. Yeah, of course I can cool it. Yeah, this is 4140. I would use mild steel, but I've got a cheap source of 4140. I can get a 4-inch square piece. Probably shouldn't be doing 4140 this way. I can get a 4-inch square piece with rounded corners for $10. Steve Parker, he drives a 4B Nazel every day for work, and he gets drops from the place he works and sells them. So.
Can you show us the pattern?
Sure. Anything you want to see passed around, well, we can do that too. I can cut this with a cold cut to start. Just a second.
Flat bar.
Okay. I need a some tools I like to use some guidance on. It's not working too good. Okay, that's kind of like two pins on your hammer, and you can make some weird shapes with it, drawing out the stock to make it go whichever way you want. There. Now this second pair of tongs helps me position it a whole lot more accurately, so there's lots of times I use that on something where I want to position it good. Heat it up one more time, and then put the pipe in there.
How much pipe?
Hmm?
How much feet you want on the pipe?
Just 3 inches more or less. This is a couple of ball bearings welded onto the stock. Now you could put some veins in the piece I just did with the tool like this, or with most any other tool, but you can also use the ball tool to kind of that gives you a little more character or something to it. Maybe ugly, depends on the eye of the beholder, I guess. And if it's thicker stock, you can get more. Now, these particular balls must not have been ball bearings because they're flattened, and ball bearings just normally don't do that. They could have been just high carbon steel, and I'm about ready for it. I've seen a lot of people neck down pipe using just a spring fuller like this, but it just squishes the pipe sideways when you use that. So what I've got is pieces that's two V's coming together, and that kind of captures the pipe and makes the job much faster. Now you've got to go real easy with it. If you're going to make a candle cup out of it, of course you go over the horn and thin out the end to start with. I start in the middle where the V is more pronounced. Okay, you hear it hitting harder, and the tool is bottomed out. And okay, so we've got it pretty well necked down there now. It leaves a little hole in the middle where you can drill it. I doubt if you can see it there. And a lot of times I cut it off here in there, and then sometimes we're going to put another fuller in here and make a ball on it there. And if I thread my candle stem, then I would tap this. And Francis used the brace for driving taps. He would put his tap in a carpenter's brace and the piece in the vise and tap his material with this. Now you got to be steady. You can break tap in an instant. Doug Merkel has never made a hole without breaking a tap, and he's bigger than anybody I see here. I would have thought he would have been rock steady, but
Ray, by using what you just said, you can align your red thread bit in line with what you're doing, and it comes out straighter.
yeah. I didn't quite get a full ball there. I got a smaller ball than I intended. Kind of hard to look on the back side, so it might be better off making the fuller on this side first and then moving to the next one. I would have the ball on my side where I could see it. You got it? And then the other thing you can do, and usually do it with a torch, is to heat this and drive it together and to have the ball sitting in the middle. Let's see what it does without the torch and see if it'll work. I don't know if it will or not because I've never done it. Well, one of the things you want to do is push things to the limit. Try and go as far as you can. Do as much as you can cold and kind of push the edges to see. Don't just accept what you've seen the blacksmiths do in the past. Try something different. Force it, move the edges. And a lot of times you'll be going to the scrap pile, and a lot of times you might come up with something new and different and wonderful. So the ball in the middle is hotter and weaker, so it is compressing rather than the neck's compressing. So the way to do that is the way I've done it before, is heat it with a torch here and here, and then it will go in there. But that's a different shape too, as far as having that ball a little bit more compressed. So it's not working the way I thought it might, but okay, you try it and then you go to the scrap pile with it. We got something in the fire, James? No.
Bring something.
Oh, okay. right, heat me a section up through there. Okay, this section here, this whole thing started with a piece of 1-inch square. You camera guys can't see me up there, can you? But this was 1-inch square and then forged down. And the way a lot of the guys are doing it now is filing it. And I don't think filing was necessarily the way the older guys did it. They had files, but they weren't necessarily the best files in the world, but they could also make top and bottom tools. I don't think they made spring swages as much, but they had top and bottom tools, these Yellens people did. So I made a piece to make that. And where'd I put it? Which one of you is focused? Now, the tools that I think I'm going to have to work on a lot, I put a hinge in them so I can open them up easier and clean up, file it, or grind it, or whatever. There's one there that's bolted together, which would be the same thing, except the hinge is quicker and easier. And the other thing that's very similar here is this molding on the bottom here. I forged those using a top swage and a fuller. And then that's essentially the same way I made this tool. I made a long piece, cut it in two, and put it on the hinge. So we'll go into that probably next as to how we did that. But Ernie Doyle in Mississippi, he was a government architect, and he got into working with George Dixon and Carl Close, Tom Latané, especially. He's going up to Tom's shop in August to work on some more stuff. But he led a couple of the 3 classes, and the candle stand was one, and this was one that he did, and I think y'all would enjoy his demonstration if you could ever get him to come out here. He doesn't like to travel more than 1 day away from home. I don't know what his problem is. But he does a lot of work with the treadle hammer. Okay, I want to put this in the other direction because these round fullers here move the stock more than the other, and I want the moving end of the stock to be over there. The hole doesn't forge the stock much, doesn't make it move as much. All right, James, shut her down. Yeah, most likely my guide's not, or stop's not going to fit in that hot metal. Made it too close. Okay. We'll try it without the guide and see if I can control it. Just a second. Okay, I haven't gotten it deep enough so that this piece back here is a fuller yet. The die has this rounded, so we hadn't gone in quite as deep as that. We'll go in one more time, cool this sucker off. Did I hear you ask what material is the die? Did somebody? Yeah. It's mild steel. It'll make 100 impressions. If you're making thousands, tool steel.
So you said that's mild steel?
Yeah.
Have you ever case hardened it?
No. Probably should have. Probably should have used tool steel. But when I was doing it, I was just interested in making this piece. Now, you notice this is flat on the bottom. It wasn't, I forged it in here, and then I opened it up and forged flat on the bottom. That's another advantage of the hinge back there, is I could just work 3 sides rather than all 4 sides.
Not yet, buddy. Don't rush it.
Hmm?
Don't rush it.
This part of the candle stand here that has the cutouts in it, I call that the piece with 10,000 hammer blows in it, because you got to go around to cut it out at least 6 passes, just a little bit each time. And then you got to go back and do the decoration on it and file it. So I made a little air hammer, 1-stroke air hammer. I tap my foot and the hammer comes down 1 blow. Trouble with brushing the scale off when it's this hot, at the time I get around to the other side, it has rescaled. I, all right. Okay, it's getting a little distorted on one side here. Now we've got a pretty good impression most of the ways around. You'd normally probably gonna have to clean up a little bit with files to some degree, but it's not like filing the whole thing from scratch. And I think I went deeper than I should have, or I think this fuller in here is way deeper than it should be for this particular design. That makes it pretty thin when I go in as deep as I have on this compared to what I did on the candle stand, so, or the door knocker. So let's heat it up here a little bit more and cut it off. Does anybody want to look at this? It'll be hot there, Mike. Well, I like to wire brush with a power wire brush while things are hot. That gives me a much cleaner surface. Okay, I had a piece of 1-inch square a while ago that was way too long. What did we do with it?
I didn't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I put it somewhere to keep it from being a problem while it was hot. 1/2-inch square.
Oh, I thought you said 1 inch.
Thank you. Okay. Give me 4 inches hot there. We'll try this swage for the rope die, twisting rope.
Mike, that die we're passing around, how did you make that? Did you start by forging that shape and then sinking in into the
Yeah.
die?
The easiest way is to use these tools here.
You did the rope the same way? You started by forging the rope shape and then just making it?
Well, on it, I started with 1/2-inch square and kind of rounded the corners, and then a hot cut and then a cold cut to give it a wide. And the first ones I made, I tried forging a 1/4-inch round stock. You know, weld 4 pieces together and then forge that, but it didn't have enough groove in it, and it went haywire sometime. So then I've started this year doing the solid stock, and that's worked much better. Yeah, I don't need the gloves with this long piece. But find me a wrench to twist with, James, please.
Wait, what?
A wrench to twist with. There's some. Okay, I've grooved all 4 sides, and the corners are somewhat rounded. Just get one of those. Just the dressing range will be fine, unless you want to talk about Francis's. But you can see they're not very durable. For these type of wrench, twisting wrenches, I think the stock ought to be twice the size of the stock you're trying to twist. Because students in here, they will go ahead and try to twist cold stock as it's cooling off, and then those Francis's style of wrench opens up. wire brush. Other side of the handle.
Oh, excuse, thank you.
Okay, it was cooler down here, so it doesn't twist as much down there. And usually the way we work with that is to put water on the hot stock. Francis said the best way to do it is use your torch and add heat. And you can add heat in a very specific place. With the water, you're cooling it off, and you're going to have to go back in the fire. With a torch, you can just keep on working until you get it exactly right. But that looks somewhat like rope, maybe. And it's pretty easy tool to make and a easy swaging operation. I went through both sides there with it. When I was using the 1/4-inch round in there, I would come in with an angle grinder and deepen those slots quite a bit more to get more depth for it. Okay, that's, you can let your fire coast a little bit for a while. Clean it out if you need to. Got a couple of other swages here, but I don't know whether they're worth the effort to show or not. We'll show them on the camera. And if you put 1/2-inch square stock in there and don't rotate it, this is what you get.
What do you use that for?
Just decoration on a picket or just whatever you want. If you rotate the stock, then you get a tapered, and you have to rotate it a lot to get a smooth surface. And you know, if you really want a smooth surface like that, you're better off making a swage with a piece like this. It's just something I tried one time and it wasn't all that wonderful. Bolting your tools together is a good way of doing the ones you're going to have to take apart, but it does take up more room. I have a hard time getting it in my box because it's longer, so it's not necessarily a good way to do it. This other one, one of the guys wanted to know how to forge a tapered point more quickly, but I don't think it worked more quickly. It's just you taper a square taper and put it in there and forge it down. But now if your die got good and warm, it might work better. And for some reason, this one was working inside, kind of giving you a hollow on there. If you put the stock in there and don't rotate it, then you get another different shape. So one of the things I'm trying to get across is try something different. Don't just think outside the box. Don't just do what you have been shown, and don't be afraid to experiment. Try something different. but like I say, half the time or more it's going to end up in the scrap pile. But every once in a while you get a jewel. And all right, let's some of you guys that saw me demonstrate in years past have already seen this, but you probably forgot it. And I see a whole bunch of new faces here, a bunch of old friends too. Okay. I got this bolt and I want to put it on this bar. I could also put a rivet on that bar on the side. I could put it in the end if I could upset it hard enough. So the bolt head goes down in this hole that I've cut, and it's about a 1/16 inch deep down into the hole. And then my tool here, this process is called staking, is one name for it. What's the other name? Swaging. Well, what I'm doing is more swaging than staking. Staking, they would probably put a round piece the same size in the hole and then go around it with a little punch, work all the way around. And some of the pieces I've seen staked, they would groove the piece that went into the hole to give it a little bit more firm hole, or cut some things in the side of it. This is similar to a monkey tool, but it has a raised section, or the shoulder has been turned back in the lathe or with a grinder, and it's this round section here is just a little bit bigger than the size of the hole. After I do it, you'll be able to see how big a diameter it was there. Sometimes I used to make a tenon, take me a couple of heats to make a tenon, and then I would say, okay, can you make a tenon with one hammer blow on the side of this bar? And I would have it hidden in my hand, and then I would so it's pretty well swaged in there. A round piece would fit a little bit tighter. Now, one of the other things I do, I'll pass this around in a minute, is in these grills like this, you might think these are tenons, but you couldn't put it together if they were tenons, because you would have to bring this bar out, and in the process you lose length. You would get everything out of shape, and it would just be impossible. So what I do, in this case, I measured my hole in the rivet that I wanted to put in here, and I drilled the hole to where it's an 1/8 inch shorter than the length of the rivet. And then I put a rivet set and just hammer it in there. It upsets in the hole. Now, another way I've done these, first way I tried it was to, like the woodworkers do, split the end of the rivet, put a little wedge in there and drive it in and have the wedge open it up. And I never could get the wedge to be in the right place at the right time when I was driving it in. So I drilled a 15/64 hole in this piece here, and for a 1/4 inch rivet, 1/4 inch hole here. Of course, I wasn't following Francis' instructions. He said drill a 64th over. And if you got something that's hard to put together, it's always a good idea to drill a 64th over. But anyway, I heated this up with a torch and then quickly drove it in. And then after it shrinks, you've got a good tight rivet. So, I tried to pull one of those rivets out. I put the 2 washers on it here and put the rivet in the hole. This one has a dogwood and a leaf with a rivet in there and upset into the hole. And I put it in a vise here and hammered on it there till these 2 washers bent. And it's pretty good and tight there. So here's a hole where I was storing the rivet in. There's a hole where the rivet's got enough clearance in it there. And just a couple of hammer blows and I can't twist it, but I'm getting old and weak.
That's the one that's an 1/8 inch short? That's the one where you drilled the hole an 1/8 inch?
Yeah, the hole is shorter, and I didn't drive it all the way down either. So the way I got onto some of this is I was going to let you try to twist it out of there. Stan Strickland over in Atlanta was tearing out some old railings in the mansion there. It was ironwork had been built by some French blacksmiths, and they were angle tenons. And he looked at them real close, and the bar had been drilled and then cut at the angle, and then put a piece of round rod in there for the tenon, and then staked around it. So that's an easier way to make an angle tenon than forging an angle tenon. Francis, when we made angle tenons in his class, I guess I didn't bring my sample piece for that, but I can show it pretty quickly. If you take a bevel gauge, there's one over on the wall over there, 2 of them, and you measure the angle of your slope of your stairs, and then you would lay it off on 2 sides here. Yep, here's the bevel gauge. One of the first things I made in Francis' class. You can lay it out and measure the angle. This one's a little bit loose now. You don't want it to be so loose that it'll move on you. And you can tighten it up this way, and you can loosen it by putting it over a hole. Same way with your tong rivets. You can tighten it up here, and you can loosen your tong by having it over the Pritchell hole. And then you would connect the other 2 sides, which I didn't do a good job of drawing. And take a hacksaw and put a notch in these. And then he would take the bottom butcher, straight-sided Hardy, if you want to call it that, and then a top butcher and a striker, and then you would work all the way around until you get the tenon material isolated, get it coming off at an angle, and then you can make it just like a regular tenon, except when you're going into the tenon tube, you got to go with the angle. So every time you turn it, you got to go back with the angle. Bob Hale, the guy who illustrated Francis' cookbook, made a jig for doing tenons, and it had a round rod here with an angled hole in it, and it would go flat up against your tenon swage and help you, and you could see. And he also had a piece that came out here that was on the center line of where the tenon was going to be, so that as you rotated this around, this piece could be set in a helper stand, and then you would make the angle tenon the same way. Now, when we did the red railing at folk school, the angles on those tenons, what were they, James? 3, 4 degrees, 5?
They varied quite a bit.
Yeah, it was a walkway going down out of the dining hall, and the slope wasn't constant. So we had to measure each one and record it, and we made a sheet metal template for it. And they were just small degrees. They were 5 degrees, maybe no more than 10 degrees.
And I made a monkey tool that fitted with an adjustable back end, and using the angle in there, you could set it at the right angle and get it all hot, and you could set the angle and the tenon at 1 feet.
I'll draw a little bit on the board for that. We had to pick it. It was 1.25 inch stock, and we'd put a regular 1/2 inch tenon on it straight. And then we set it up on the edge of the table, and we clamped the post down, and this long angle tenon, this would be hot here, and the angle tenon, or the monkey tube, what was it, 12 inches long?
Yeah, 12 inches.
And we would
Set screw is at 10 inches.
so we would have a stop here that would keep it into place, and this was off the end of the table where you could sledgehammer it, and you ended up with this, since the monkey tube was square on the end, then the top of the picket was at an angle, and we had to do each post every 10 feet at a different angle.
And there was adjustment screw. Let's see, try to get over here.
Right here.
Yeah. Right here was an adjustment screw. So we could adjust each post a little bit different to get the correct angle.
And it worked out good. We used half-lap joints at the joints of the stock.
Larry, you gotta have to tell us not Lenny Ledet eating that.
Any of you know Lynn Ledet?
Lenny Ledet, the guy with the arm in the hat?
At the Havana conferences, big mouth, always talking. He was in the workshop there, and this 1.25 inch stock, he was one of the less skilled blacksmiths there at the time, so we gave him the job of heating the stock, the 1.25 inch, and he brought it out of the fire, one of them one time, and it was. He was trying to cool it off by blowing on it. Well, as much as he talks, well, he did have a lot of wind, so that might have been a pretty good solution to blow on it. Let's make a tenon on the end of this piece. Give me a, oh, wait a minute. Okay, how much stock do you need to leave to make a tenon of a certain length? Now if you're, oh, I said, wait a minute. We got to put this on. If you're making a tenon that is the round tenon, half the size of square stock, how long is that? If you leave a ½ inch on the tenon, how long is it going to draw out? You can calculate it. Clifton Ralph is good at calculating his stock because he deals with big stock, and it's more efficient for him to calculate it. Most of us would rather just forge it and see where we went wrong and do it over again. Okay, if we got 1 inch square and a ½ inch round tenons here, I can fit 4 of those in the end of that. But I've also got some other stock left over. I've got this part in the middle. I got this, got every corner. I got lots of stock besides the 4. So if you're going 1 inch square to ½ inch round, it'll draw out 5 times the length you start with. So now if you're going ½ inch to 3/8, which is what I have here is a 3/8 tenon swage, it won't draw out but about 3 times the length or something like that. So, okay, these tenon swages that I make here, this is 4140. This one section here is tapered. All of them were drilled with 3/8 inch drill bits here, and this was ground or milled out on a taper about 15 degrees on each side. This one was just ground or milled flat, so it's 3/8 inch all the way across. Of course, the round one was just drilled round and then the edges relieved. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. So now, the other part that I've got here is a guide. And for my students in my class, this is a really big help to not double cut your shoulders. Now you never want to try to make a tenon with less than a 1/4 inch stock sticking out. If you do, it just folds over bird beaks. So you always got to have something like 3/8 or ½ inch. We'll put a ½ inch on this, my eyeball ½ inch. Got to take this off to heat the stock, and then I can put it back on and run it right against the tenon swage. Now, the other thing that Bob Hale had on his, he had a round stock that was the same height as this. So that pretty much guaranteed his tenon would be centered on the end of his bar, because the hammer hit on the top of that round bar and the bottom die hit on the bottom of it. So it was pretty much guaranteed. Foolproof way to make tenons. And then he also did the angle tenon. And some of you older guys around here may have remembered seeing, I think I've demonstrated that tool here maybe in years past, I'm not sure. Now when you're starting out with a cold swage, it takes a little bit more heat. After you get your swage heated up, you can make your tenons faster because it doesn't suck the heat out of your tenon as quickly. I don't guess I'll need the gloves for this. Okay, one of the things, I don't know if we'll get time to talk about it today, is the roll pattern that Francis has up in the corner there. For the old hoods that he had, how do you make a transition from a 3-foot square to a 10-inch diameter round? And that was one of the things he always talked about. Okay, I go in the tapered spot first, Okay, it's got the shoulder established, and now I'm going in the straight one. Square octagon, round again. And now into the round. Okay, we've got a pretty nice tenon, and I think you can see on the end it's pretty well centered on the stock. And my half-inch didn't draw out as much as I said it would. It's only drawn out twice as much, twice the length of the half-inch I started with.
Don't even need a monkey tool, do you?
Uh,
Don't even need a monkey tool on that.
Not hardly.
Okay.
Okay, usually we'll monk it, and monking the tenon is one of the most forgotten or ignored. Precision monking is something you need to learn to do. And I didn't have a monkey tool here, but there's probably one somewhere here. But anyway, in a lot of my classes,
The idea behind it is make it perfectly round.
no, the idea behind it is to make the shoulder perfectly square or perpendicular to this. When you put together a square frame or that's tenoned, if your tenon shoulder has an angle to it and you head those tenons, that if it's not square, that frame is going to go sideways on you. It's going to cock or do something. If you make a table and you don't have those tenons square and you hit them, they're going to, 3 legs on the ground. James found me one for a half-inch. It's bigger than I need.
So Clay, I just did the math on the half-inch square, 3/8 tenon.
Yes, sir.
Come out 2.25.
Okay. What I ended up with was roughly an inch. Okay. Of course, Francis, in his final years, he had worn out the cartilage in his wrist from upsetting against his wrist. And he said, you don't want to do that, but I hadn't found another way to do this. One thing you might do is have a stand or something back here to push it, but you want to have this red hot, and you want to rotate the stock every hammer blow. Because when you're hammering, if you hammer 3 or 4 blows, you're generally going to pull that angle towards you. But if you rotate it between each hammer blow, then it'll kind of average out. Now, I haven't found a good way to measure. You know, it's too small a thing to put a square on. And when we monk it, we've upset the end here, so it's not a perfect straight bar anymore. The best thing I've found to do is to sight it and see if the sides of the tenon bar, this one's kind of crazy, usually they're straight, see if this is parallel with this. And you can look at it and sometimes you can see it's off at an angle, and you know you're going to have problems if you have done it enough. So Francis had always said, just rotate it every time. He never talked to us about how important it was to have it square and how to get it square other than just rotating it. But I had a guy built a king-size bed frame, and he had, 1 inch square stock, and he just laid it down and just hammered on it. He was kind of lazy. He could have put a hipper stand here and rotated it, and I should have been on his case and made him do that. And then that thing went about 6 inches out of plane. So then you got a problem. That's where Francis was so great. The student's project, he'd look at it 2 or 3 times, and he'd get his hammer, and everything would be right. And I don't know how long it takes to develop that. Yes, ma'am.
There was another thing that he said too, if you need to square up the edges on your tenon, if you take a file to file it, cut off or sand off one side of your flat file.
A safe edge file.
Yeah, so that you can get in there and not damage one or the other sides of the piece.
We're going to triple or quad team y'all with Francis stuff in the next demonstrations between Allison and myself and James and Gordo, if he's here, to try to tell you everything. Yes, sir.
Is there a reason you don't want it to set it on the ground and hit it like this?
That would probably work.
To save your risk?
Yeah, that would. Usually you want to, if you've got a piece of steel down there or something. And now when I'm upsetting a piece of steel on the anvil, I don't like to put the hot end down. I like to have the hot, because if it's on the anvil, it's going to be cooling off quicker than it will if I'm hammering on it. But you can't hold it by hand because that scale is going to burn the heck out of you. You can hold it with tongs, but then you can't rotate it with tongs. And that's something you need to do, is to rotate it every hammer blow usually, and especially if you're jamming it down to upset, you got to rotate every hammer blow to kind of keep it straight, and then before you go back in the fire, straighten it out exactly. And of course the hardy hole was Francis's biggest tool for straightening and bending. Of course he's famous for saying it's either straight or it's not straight. If somebody asked him if it's straight, he'd say it's either straight or it's not straight. He'd say, is this straight enough? And that's not the question you wanted to ask him. Okay. Let's see what we can do with some of this stuff here. I have meant for the last 3 days to make a little starter section on this, but I didn't. So I had too many other things that were more fun to do, I guess. But it sure was great. I got in here Monday. I went to the Urbana conference in South Dakota and then came on here, and Matt let me come in here and work, and that was pretty good. I spent a lot of time trying to find things that I thought were here, but since Francis is gone, they have been displaced or something. Which camera is better for getting up close? Okay. I'm going to show you the ends of these pieces of stock, and you'll see that they're very similar to that swage I used to well, I got to hold them in my hand. Okay, you getting anything?
Yes, we are.
So that's some of the shapes. It's fairly easy to make with simple tools and a striker or treadle hammer. Seeing the end shapes good?
Yes.
Okay. So And one of the most helpful things for me is this little V-block. I make a lot of my V-blocks out of a piece of angle sitting in a piece of channel, but at 90 degrees or 45 degrees. This one's sitting at a 30-degree angle, more or less. And that is real helpful for working on some of these pieces of stock. And you can see from this that I have removed some stock from some of these, and you could probably tell from the end view on some of these that some of the stock was removed to give you a more variety of shapes here. So we'll start out with a piece of square stock and see, maybe try this shape here with it and see. And the tools I use are just 3 different diameter little top fullers and a couple of sizes of swages. Some of these are very similar to the tools that you find that they used to hammer down the, what do you call the rings around the barrels? Hoops. So they would hammer those down with these tools. So okay. Usually I start with one of the little swages here on the corner. And yes, sir.
For the camera, put it on the paper.
I did.
Oh, you did.
Yeah. I put them up there. The other thing about this grill, this is a copy of Bill Fugate's grill. Bill is up in western Pennsylvania, Xeniophile, Pile, and he made one, so I had to copy it to bring around with me. And you'll notice that the pass-throughs are opposite each other. A lot of times grills like that, all the pass-throughs will be going in directions, but these are 90 degrees apart. You know, this one's going this way, that one's that way, this one's going that way, and this one. So they're all 90 degrees at each other. So figure out how to do that. You getting a pretty good shot, Carl? Yes. Yep. You shouldn't strike on an originally hard ball peen. You should heat it and let it normalize. Now, we didn't do much that first heat. Got a little bit of a start. My fuller pass is not consistent. Square stock doesn't seem to work near as well for me as stock that I have broken or ground or milled off the corners, so you can get different levels. It makes it a lot nicer if you have different levels. So the next piece we'll work on is a piece that has part of the corner ground off or removed. That wire brush keeps going different places. I'm going to go back in with a second. Change the design here. This was pretty bland. This doesn't have much character. But that little groove I put in with that second pass a while ago is showing up in part of that, and that might be a neat feature there, but just two fullers is not very exciting. Two swages. Yeah, I need to study this to see. And I guess this was a piece of 5/8. It has more room to do something than just the 1/2-inch stock that I brought. But here's a piece of 1/2 inch with a corner off. Try to figure out what I did with it. Okay, that's a nicer one there.
The other two, we'll cool them off and pass them around.
Well, I'm
Oh,
going
you
to
want
work.
to use them? That's
He-
all right.
Yeah,
Okay. I'll need that one up next.
yeah. Okay, where this kind of corner was from the ground off, now we've got a radius sticking up there, and then we'll go in with the fuller on the bottom end there on the next pass.
Bring it down.
It'll burn.
That's good. That's good.
Okay, I went on the...
This same one heated up again?
Yeah. I went on the top edge that time. This time I'll try going down on the bottom edge. And your imagination has got to be working better than mine is today. It's kind of like a kaleidoscope. Every time you turn it a different way, you get a different pattern. Oh. Okay, we'll try small fuller down on the lower flat here. I said fuller clay.
In the view, yeah.
That one's not looking too bad. Oh, okay, we've got, I think, I can't see what I've done. There. This is essentially three swages in a row on the angle. Usually start out with one of the swages on one of the corners. And you take baby steps. But this is give you an idea of something to start with and play with, and come up with something better on your own. And these are not too exciting or spectacular, doesn't seem like, but maybe give you some ideas. And
We're getting about to the end, Clay. What-
time
what-
to quit, huh?
What you got? Something else, about 3 or 4 minutes, or? Talk about the hammer.
It's not showing up very well.
There it is. There it is. It's catching the light now.
Yeah.
So this puzzle really have a solution?
Yes. If my brain is working, I can work it. If my brain is not working, I can't work it. James said talk about the hammer. It's a 50-pound hammerhead, a 1-horse motor. It runs off of 120 or 240, and that's where it starts. It's the minimum weight anvil for this size hammer. It should be a little heavier maybe, but it does pretty well. It needs to be bolted down. What we've got here is kind of a temporary thing. We build them in workshop for between $1,100 and $1,200 usually. You have to have 15 or so people to do the workshop. I get a hammer as my fee plus some mileage, and the shop owner gets a hammer free, and then the coordinator who gets the people together, collects the money, and schedules the pre-work sessions. And I did it while I was talking. Well, he has the hardest job to put the workshop together. Oh, we shouldn't have. I hope they didn't record that on video. They do a lot of pre-work ahead of time. They make all the sub-assemblies here, and then we get together for 3 days, and then we put the frame together and the tire, and mount the guide here, mount the tire and the axle. And we built 385 of them in workshops. I've had 4 or 5 calls with problems. I got one this morning on the way over here. My hammer was rattling, and I couldn't find what it was. And I looked down in the hammerhead, and there's 3 lead balls in there, about 1 inch in diameter. I never heard that before. We had some hammers that when we first put them together, the lead was loose in the hammerhead. If you superheat the lead, get it too hot, then it comes loose from the, so the solution to that is take a piece of 1/2 inch square and go down in there and stake that lead to the sides, and once you hit 3 or 4 good hammer blows, the lead's in there pretty good. And I had one where the back broke off of the welding there. But in the whole, I get nothing but good compliments on the hammers. The way the people are happy. We did a workshop at Paul DeFrancesco's shop in Salt Lake. We did another one in Phoenix, and we've done them from 3 in Maine and a couple in Florida and several in North Carolina and Alabama. I hope I've showed you some things this morning. Mainly want to get the idea across that you can build some tools for your forging fairly quickly. Now, it takes a whole lot longer to get the tools prepped than it does to do the actual forging on them. You got to do a lot of pre-work on them to get it done, and that is the biggest thing. I didn't mention drawing dies. I use these as drawing dies, and there's some other drawing dies somewhere here. They're a little bit more radical than that, and I didn't get to demonstrate a lot of the tools that I made, but I did want to at least expose you to them making these little molding things, because I think they're really neat. And you put them on some of the projects like here and there, it really adds to it there. But we did cover a lot of ground. We got a lot of tools made. We'll try to clean them up a little bit and get them ready for the auction. And maybe my next session, and Allison's session, we're going to be doing a little traditional joinery project that she's designed and done most of the work on. I got a simpler 2 pieces, but we're going to talk a lot about Francis and try to remember him for the way he taught us and inspired us and kept us in line as best he could. It's great to be back in his shop here, which it'll always be his shop in my mind. But so thanks for watching. I hope I gave you some ideas and some things that you can go back and use about the